Thank you for joining us for Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, a local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, and we're located at 7800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. This week, we will look at a topic that is very simplistic once again, simply entitled Reasonable Expectations. Today, we will focus on the topic of reasonable expectations regarding self. What do you set and how do you set reasonable expectations for your own personal life as a roadmap for you, regardless of what others might determine? How did you determine the path that you're presently on? It may sound like a simple question, but it's a question that many times we fail to really take pause to say, how did I determine the path that I'm on? How did I decide that this is the walk that I'm going to walk? What about the measurable milestones that chart your progress along the way? How do you measure your path? How do you determine how far on the path you really are and how successful and what type improvements may be necessary as you make this life's journey? How did you make the choice? Well, there are basically four, and I'm sure you could probably think of other ways, but these are the ideas that I have in terms of, for the most part, how we make choices. And this is inclusive of myself as well. Many people make choices that are driven by life experiences that are not their own, but those who came before them. I want to be a fireman because everybody in my family expects me to be a fireman. I want to be a farmer because everybody in my family expects me to be a farmer because everybody were farmers. Driven by the life experiences that are not yours, but those who come before us. Or we make choices determined by what one believes others want to see, determined by what one believes others want to hear, determined by what one believes others want to see in them, how they will regard them, who they are. So that's how a lot of people make choices about life. It's determined by what one believes others want to see, what others want to hear, and what others want to believe regarding who we are. Here's another way that people make life skill choices, life path choices. It's decided by one's personal will, either with or without regard about how the choice or the choices will impact others, whether it's positively or negatively. This can be good or this can be bad. This is what I want. It's decided by the individual's personal will, with or without regard about, have you heard people say, I don't care what people think, I'm going to do this. It's with or without regard about how the choices one make will impact others. Will it have a positive impact or will it have a negative impact? And here's a fourth way in terms of how we decide life regarding ourselves. By truly seeking God's counsel and walking in the path that pleases heaven, even when it is not what others expect, what others have taught us, or what is self-gratifying personally. Let me share with you a biblical illustration that is spoken very candidly to this point. Reasonable expectations regarding self are never to be self-serving. If it's not to be self-serving, it's not supposed to be just to please other people, what they want for us. That's still self-serving. But listen at what Jeremiah the prophet has to say about that. In Jeremiah chapter 10, verse 23, "O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walks to direct his steps. I know that the way," Jeremiah says, this is what we must learn about the journey, the habits that we pick up, that we learn, that we live in, the course of life that we find ourselves, the lead, the thing that guides us, the thing that we live for. Jeremiah says, that's not in man. I know that the way of man is not in himself. I know the journey is not in the man. It's not in his habit. It's not in his course of life or the lead. In other words, if that comes from inside of us, Jeremiah says, there's no telling how that will look. There's no telling how that will end. There's no telling what behaviors we will fall into. And then he said, it is not in man that walks to direct his own steps. That word direct means it is not in man that walks to establish, to fix, to arrange, to make this the constitutional law of me. It is not in a man that walks to do all of this for himself. Have you ever heard people say, I'm my own man, I'm my own woman, I do what I believe, I do what I feel? Jeremiah says, no. Reasonable expectations regarding self should never originate inside of self. The option that works is truly seeking God's counsel and walking in the path that pleases heaven, even when it is not what others expect, what others have taught, or what is self-gratifying. The objective is to seek God. The objective is to walk in the directions of God. The objective is always to find the journey that God has for us, to learn the habits that God has for us, to develop the life core skills that God is pleased with, and to allow those life core skills to lead us in our way. Let me invite you to come back again tomorrow, and we will look at another set of reasonable expectations, and we will see how those will bless us. I'll see you back in class again tomorrow. Don't be late, and don't